Our first panel session today. It's going to be around the global economic outlook. And we're having an amazing guest, Ms. Margareta Drzeniek-Hanouz. She's the senior economist and managing partner at Horizon Group. She is going to take her time and really go through some of her work in related to what's really happened, how COVID has affected. She's a lead author of many benchmarking reports of the World Economic Forum and has advised governments and agencies, ministries around the world, specifically in the Arab world. I'd like to welcome Ms. Margareta. How are you?
I'm very well, Vasco, I'm very well, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's really an interesting time for the economy, so it is great to be working. I look forward to the discussion today and to the takeaways and to hearing also from the questions from the participants and to interact with everyone.
Thank you. So I think we're going to plan of having a good presentation of slides from your end in terms of sharing some information about your work. However, we're going to do it a bit differently today, and we're going to kind of take a pause after a few slides to really discuss. I had a chance to have a peek at your slides, and it has a good amount of information that we can discuss and take it forward. So I'll leave the floor for you. I do have your slides from my end. If you'd like, I can go through them and we can coordinate together.
Yes, thank you, Vasco, and hello everyone again. Let's get started. I mean, before maybe I start delving into the topics, a few words of caution. And we have all been living through this time over the past year. It's been almost a year since the pandemic was declared by the WHO, sorry. But I think one of the key defining features right now of anything that I'm going to present later on is the incredible uncertainty that we're all facing. So, whatever we present in terms of the outcomes, and I'll be showing a lot of numbers and a lot of predictions going forward in order to be able to narrow down this uncertainty and to provide an outlook and to give you a snapshot of what the current thinking is about where the economy could be going in the coming couple of years. But it can change. It is changing on a daily basis as well. So please keep this in mind. And it is very important these days to be flexible, to be open, to have the feelers out of all the time, and to navigate this very, very uncertain and rapidly changing environment. So can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
So just in terms of a quick outline of what I'm going to talk today, we will start with a global outlook for 2022, and then we will pause for a moment, and we can have an opportunity to also discuss. Then we'll take a look at the MENA regional recovery, which we can also discuss for a moment. And then we'll talk about the travel and tourism industry and its implication also for sports. The thinking behind this is that there is very little that we know how the behavior will impact the sports industry, but because it's very correlated to the travel and tourism industry, I'll be talking a little bit about the travel and tourism industry as well. So with this, let's get started with the first real slides. These are the growth projections from the IMF, right? This is what the IMF is projecting, has been projecting for 21 and 2022. It is from what they call the World Economic Outlook, which is the main publication that they do every year or a few times throughout the year in order to project, the measure and project the global economic growth. And you see, here, there are three categories of countries or country groups. We're looking at the global economy, at the advanced economies, which is all the developed countries essentially, and then emerging market and developing economies, which is the developing world. What is very interesting actually in this on this slide is that in 2020, of course, we had a very strong drop. This is a drop that we haven't seen in recent human history, minus 3.5% overall. Just to put this into perspective, in a good year, global economic growth should be around 4% in a good year, right? So if it's 4%, it's actually really good. Most of the time, it's between 2.5% and 4%, somewhere in this area. So you will see that, in their predictions of the IMF for 5.5 is that we will rebound. Now, we will rebound because the global economy has been doing very poorly in 2020. So, there's this very strong catch-up effect as people go back to travel, hopefully as well, as people go back to work, as the demand is picking up, people start spending money again. And this is what's going to be driving those 5.5% that are predicted for 2021. There are a number of assumptions that are made until this. And the most important one, we'll talk about this in the next slides, which is the progress of vaccination, right? So this was published in January 2021. It's fairly fresh. It was already based on the fact that we will have a certain idea about mid of the year, third quarter of the year, the majority of the people, at least in developing countries, will be vaccinated, right? What is interesting to see here is that maybe one commentary. When you look at emerging markets and developing economies and advanced economies, the difference is not very big, right? Which means actually that for 2021, the recovery in the emerging markets will be still slower than it will be in the advanced countries, right? So the recovery will start in the advanced countries. It will be stronger this year in the advanced countries, and the emerging markets will follow in 2022 to a larger extent. This year's recovery, when we look at the regional distribution of growth prospects for this year, this year's recovery will be to a large extent driven by the recovery in the US, which is expected to be very strong. There has been also a lot of fiscal stimulus that was just agreed. All the countries are actually actively stimulating the economy right now, but there's going to be also true recovery because of the progress of vaccinations. And on the other hand, in Asia, and most notably in China, China is actually the country that is going to be recording one of the highest growth rates in 2021. It will be at it's estimated at 8.3%. And the other country that is going to be driving significant recovery, but that's somewhat less important globally in terms of economic power, is India. So for India, the projections for 2021 are a whopping 11.3%, which is very, very high. Those countries will continue to grow also in 2020. Just before we move to the next, let me just, there's just one thing that I would like to say. This is the short term. So when you look at the short term until 2022, maybe one of the things to watch out for, there's a number of risks on the horizon, and we need to watch out for them as the year is evolving, as 2021 is evolving and 2022 is evolving. And those that I have written here down on the left side. First of all, food crisis. The food prices have been rising, which is for many countries, this could mean that people could not afford food anymore. This could lead to social crisis at the same time. And this has a huge impact on economy. So there's a number of those follow-on effects that we could see. And then the other big bucket, of course, are financial crises. There has been a lot of liquidity, a lot of money that was given to the economy. Many companies were very fragile or are very fragile coming out of the recession. And the question is whether the financial systems in the countries will be able to shoulder this kind of a burden. So financial crisis is another significant risk that we should be watching out for that could derail this economy as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is now this is what's going to be the most important driver of economic recovery right now. There's actually two. So this is a very important driver, the speed of vaccination and by when countries are going to be vaccinating. Why is this important? Because generally, when you look at the history of pandemics recover in V's. What does it mean when I'm sure you've heard the discussion at the beginning about what shape is the recession going to be like, right? There's a V, which is, it drops very strongly and then recovers very strongly. So generally, once the pandemic is over, the economic activity resumes relatively quickly. That's why this vaccination speed is very important, because the moment a certain share of the population is vaccinated, right, meaning widespread coverage is achieved, which is what we are looking here at, those countries will be recovering. So it's very important for the timing of recovery by when we will be able to vaccinate about 50 to 60% of the population. This is what we're looking here as well. And you see here, the blue countries are the ones that will going to be the fastest. So the recovery will start in advanced countries in Europe.
Gentlemen, do you have?
And then also the second range will be the light blue countries, which is Canada, a lot of Latin America, also Russia and Australia. And then the developing world will vaccinate much more slowly, with Africa and some of the Asian countries and a couple of places in Latin America lagging behind. And this is what's going to drag out the recovery. And actually, this is why the developing countries are going to be the latecomers to the recovery, and most of the recovery in the developing countries will be taking place in 2022 rather than 2021. So developed countries, industrial economies, US, Europe, 2021, it looks pretty good for now, despite the hiccups that we have been observing in Europe. Those countries have simply the logistics in place. They have the health personnel. They have the capacity to be able to roll out those vaccines relatively quickly. In the poorer countries, we just very quickly face the constraints that are very structural, meaning logistics are not there. You know, if you want to really reach every little village and every town, you really need to roll out. You need to be able to ensure the cold chain, to ensure that you have personnel, to ensure that people can get there. So it is going to be, to a large extent, a very physical effort. And for those countries, many of those infrastructures are still not in place and are still not really performing. The next slide, let's go to the next slide, please. One of the important elements is also that there are new variants that are coming up. I'm sure you've heard the new variants. Why are they important? Most of there's a number of uncertainties that those new variants introduce. First of all, there's a race between new variants and the speed of vaccination. There's a medical relationship between them because the virus mutates as long as there's no immunity against the virus. The moment we reach a certain immunity, meaning a certain amount of the population is vaccinated, the virus will mutate much more slowly and its impact will be much less. So it's a race in terms of the mutations. If we vaccinate fast enough, we can slow down the mutations as well, and we can slow down the spread of the mutations. So this is one reason. The second reason is that, of course, the new variants, you can see here and this is just modeling data from one of the counties in the US, but I thought it was really interesting to show this. So if you look at new variant infectivity, the new variants are much more infectious than the older variants, right? So you see, if we vaccinate much more slowly, if the vaccination rate is, this is the red line here, is at 2,000 per day, and this was for a county in the US, so it's a slow vaccination rate, we can still get to second and third waves around October 2021, right? So the red line shows you that if we have a very, very slow vaccination speed, despite all the efforts and all the money that has been put into vaccination, we will not be able to prevent having a third major or fourth wave in 2021. And 2021 is the year where we are looking at a recovery in the advanced economies. If this does not happen because we have to lock down again, this could derail the projections that I have been talking about before significantly, and we could go into another year of very slow growth in 2021. So there is a significant interplay between the new variants and the vaccination. That's why the speed of vaccination is so important. And you can see here, if this county vaccinates at a very, very, very high rate, meaning 11,000 per day, right? You can see here that the blue line, or I think it's a purple line, it's flat, right? So we can eliminate the new variants by vaccinating very, very rapidly. That's why what the MENA countries are doing as well, and the speed has been picking up around in Qatar as well. I think this is a very important strategy, and it's really the way forward. And this is what will prevent further mutation. But in order to be able to do this, the efforts have to be global, right? So the moment you are, of course, there is a local capacity to do it, because if your population is vaccinated, you're less fragile, you're less vulnerable to the new variants. But if if the variants still continue spreading in Africa because the vaccination progress is slow and they don't have access to vaccines, then you still cannot. There's still an effect on the global economy spanning from that. That's why efforts such as COVAX, you may have heard about it. These are the efforts to really supply vaccines to developing countries. Those efforts are very, very important. And it's very important that countries do not retort to vaccine protectionism, because the economy is so interconnected. All the countries are so interconnected that you will not be able to protect your economy from the economic damage if the vaccine is not spread globally or across your most important trade partners in any case. Let's go to the next slide. And I think this is the moment where we can pause.
I mean, the presentation makes so much sense with the current situation that we are in. So as you mentioned, that we are going to bounce back, and there will be tourism again, hopefully very soon. But my worry is about some of those underdeveloped countries, and they are some of those very popular destinations. So which are the latecomers, according to your presentation, where the vaccination drive is rather slow as compared to other developing countries or the developed countries. So my question to you would be, on top of my head, is do you think, or do you propose any kind of strategy that would basically help these countries or destination to bring back tourism in time, and because these are countries which are basically relying on tourism business to boost the economy. So do you have some strategies in mind, or is there any new research that's going to come up to help them come up or cope up with this current situation, or rather to expedite the vaccination, helping them with some kind of logistics? So what is your take on that?
So there's a number of efforts underway. One, because there are many roadblocks for those countries that they need to hit in order to be able to vaccinate their populations. One important roadblock is the availability of the vaccines, right? The sheer availability of the vaccines. Even in European countries, in the US, the speed is determined to a large extent by the availability of sheer physical amounts that we can produce at such rapid, so quickly, right? So this is one important element. And then, there's been a lot of, what we have seen a lot is there's been a lot of protectionism. Protectionism in the sense that countries want to keep the vaccines to themselves. They have been, or vaccine nationalism, you could call this. They have been, vaccinating their populations on a priority basis. But this is a strategy which is not necessarily going to work in the medium to longer term, because, how interconnected the economy is. So I think, first of all, any vehicles around the international cooperation to share vaccines are very important. Any vehicles to help countries, developing countries, pay for those vaccines, because then another roadblock is a financial roadblock, are also very important. There has been one which has been put into place by WHO and Gavi, which is the International Vaccine Alliance. It's called COVAX, C-O-V-A-X. And this is actually like a common pool of vaccines that donors have been financing vaccines for the developing world. And I think this is a very important element to look out for, right? So the way COVAX is going to be, it's not been so much in the media, but COVAX is very important. The other element is what has been done in the past very successfully around logistics. Logistics have been, especially for this vaccine, because some of the vaccine need to be stored at a very cold temperature. Vaccines are very fragile, actually. So if you think about, distributing in a developing country, it's very difficult because of the temperature, because of the facilities, the infrastructure, availability of cool warehousing, et cetera, et cetera. So anything any collaboration, for example, the private sector, can help to distribute the vaccine is crucial. It's going to be crucial as well. So I think there's going to be And there is already a lot of discussion with the private sector about how to distribute. The freight forwarders are discussing with many countries as well. In the past, there's been actually a very interesting model around Coca-Cola, which has been distributing vaccine as well, because they have cooled trucks that go to many villages and have a very strong supply chain or distribution chains even in smaller towns. So, this type of collaborations could be very important, or will be very important as well. And then, one last element when we speak about tourism more directly, of course, and this is something that we haven't been speaking about that much yet, but there is a lot of discussion right now happening around travel bubbles, meaning, how do you protect people? So, and a lot of new approaches being tested is, if you go to a resort in an African country, how can you protect people from not going out? And how can you make sure that maybe all the staff of this resort is vaccinated and you don't allow people to go out? So this kind of travel bubbles have been put into place in some places. This is one strategy that can be very successful. There is definitely a lot of demand for travel that's picking up slowly, as in Europe, at least where we sit, where the recovery is, where the vaccination is starting to pick up, people will start to travel relatively quickly. We have seen this from the social media data as well. But this type of approaches, this is something that the countries can do directly to ensure that they reduce the risk of vaccination in the destination by vaccinating on a priority basis, or among one of the priority groups, the staff who work in the travel and tourism industry. And then, any types of international agreements around vaccination passports are going to be very important as well. Now, those are very slow to put into place. And we see it at the European level, but as you can tell, it requires a lot of. The IATA is actually doing a very important push also to have a vaccination certificate, a vaccination passport, so that you can travel. So this type of efforts to have vaccination passports so that you can travel because you're vaccinated are going to be tremendously important as well.
I mean, the efforts are already in place, and the strategies have been really thought of, and it's just a matter of how to really look upon them and kind of put them now in motion, so to speak. I'd like to go back on the previous slide, which kind of really staggering, is the red area in the Africas. I mean, 2023 and onwards for a vaccine to at least start there, isn't this a bit frightening?
It is. But the vaccine development, I think some of it is that we got used to the speed of digital technologies and to spread information very rapidly. But here, the digital technology, it's still a very physical issue, right? And we sometimes forget that the physical infrastructure in those countries is not as strong as we would like it to be. So it is really a question of availability of the vaccine. But I think what we need to keep in mind as well, it is a big area that's red in terms of geographical surface. For the global economy, Africa is still, I have to say, unfortunately, because it's not very developed, right? It's not a very important continent in terms of the weight in the global economy, right? So this is not what's going to derail the global economy. It's going to slow it down a little bit, but it's not going to derail the global economy. So the countries that are going to be vaccinating late are not going to have an immediate impact on the recovery in 2021, because the recovery is gone. Most of the growth is happening between US, Europe, and China. This is where it's happening. This is where the big economies are, and those are going. And India as well to some extent, by the way. Those are the countries or the regions that are going to grow very strongly in 2021, and they will drive the growth. I think the danger here, the danger around Africa is, as I was talking earlier, is that this will scar the continent for the long term, right? The effects will be very, very, the scarring effects, the long-term scarring will be strong. There's a significant potential for follow-on crisis around food crisis. If food prices really go up, then this could lead to a number of other risks in countries that could derail the recovery of Africa for a long time. Before the pandemic, Africa was the growing star, right? It was the growth continent. We were talking a lot about the potential of Africa. There has been a lot of leapfrogging happening, a lot of very exciting projects. It could be that this is now put into question, and this would be very unfortunate for the continent, and of course, longer term for the global recovery, it would be very.
We've just received a remark from the Q&A, and thank you for the audience using the Q&A slot. We encourage you to share any questions you have, any remarks. So the remark is, most of the African countries actually have started the vaccination rollout.
Yes, I mean, starting and finishing, the time is just going to be longer, right? Because of the infrastructure and the capacity constraints, the time is going to be significantly longer than in developed countries. So, I think that's the challenges that those countries will be facing.
I'd like to continue with the slides, if possible.
MENA region, all right? What's interesting in the MENA region? I think one of the interesting, when you look at the regional picture of recovery, actually MENA is a very interesting case. And when we speak about MENA, this Middle East, so the Gulf countries, Levant and North Africa. So this is the whole bunch of countries that we're looking at. And why is it interesting? Because for most of the countries, as we've seen earlier, the recovery is starting very strong in 2021. There's a very strong catch-up effect this year. And it's, goes back to something a little bit more normal next year. It's the opposite in the MENA countries, right? It starts more slowly in 2021 this year, and it picks up much more strongly in 2022. And this is mainly driven by actually the countries of North Africa. So North Africa and Levant countries. So it's not so much the case for the Gulf countries. In the Gulf countries, actually the recovery is going to be fairly strong this year, and we will talk about why this is the case. And the Gulf countries are very dependent on oil prices. So we will take a look at the oil demand and the oil prices as well in one of the next slides. But I think, when you look at the region, at the region as a whole, this year, most of the Gulf countries will achieve growth rates that are in line with or slightly above what has been achieved historically over the past decade. So growth is clearly coming back in 2021 and will be even stronger in 2022 as well. But let's move on to the maybe one important element for the MENA region as well, because the region is so diverse. The recovery is also going to be very diverse. So, and it really mainly dependent on vaccine prospects. So the vaccine prospects are going to be crucial in determining the recovery. And the other aspect that will be very important as well for this year is the monetary and fiscal support. So, a lot of the countries have been providing a lot of fiscal support, income support to the populations, and have been supporting the companies as well. Also financial support to companies, and this are going to be also the amounts that are going to be pumped into the economy are going to be an important driver of the recovery as well. So fiscal support, but mainly vaccine progress so that we can go back to normal as soon as possible. Let's move to the next slide. Okay. Of course, oil production is very important. Oil and gas. When I say oil, it's oil and gas. And we can just looking here at the oil production, because most of the charts and most of the data is just simply more readily available for oil, but they are they're going hand in hand in a way. So when and what's interesting about this is that we had the slump in the oil prices and also in terms of the oil production, hydrocarbon demand in early 2020. It was scary, very scary moment for most of the countries in the Gulf. Scary because the price has plummeted. In the meantime, the price has been recovering as well. And the forecast is that as travel resumes, will start resuming over the summer, the oil demand will pick up in around Q2, Q3. Q3, it will be approximately almost back to what we had historically in the past years. And then by end of 2021, it would really hit the line and be around the same, consumption will be around the same level that we had historically in 2019 and 2018. Small differences, but nothing compared to what we had in 2020. So it's important to keep in mind that by Q3 2021, it will recover, mainly driven also by, to a large extent, this is driven by the demand from the travel and tourism industry as well. Airplanes consume a lot of oil, and we see always this peak over the summer in demand. In terms of prices, most of the prices foresee, and this is just a general statement, about 70 to 80 USD a barrel, and this is based on Brent forecast by Goldman Sachs. By the end of the year, so around Q3, it will start, which is very close to what we have right now. We're at 63 right now, so it will go up by the end of the year a little bit, but it's not going to shoot through the roof anytime soon. That's actually good news for the region, and this is going to continue then afterwards to increase slowly. But of course, anything that we're saying for 2022 is subject to very strong uncertainty at this point in time. But that's what the current thinking is about the oil and gas production and prices. Let's go to the next, and I think the next one is, again, the so what? What do these developments mean for us?
So what would these developments really mean for us when we saw that there's a positive range between, you said, between 2.5 to 4, and I saw those numbers actually reflecting in the GCC kind of percentage-wise.
So, I think around the GCC countries, there's going to be a rebound in 2021, but it's not going to be, as we said, pandemics mostly recover in Vs. That means that most of the effect will be catching up. We'll be going back to the level we had before the pandemic in the course of 2021, right, in terms of the income level. So there will be a very strong recovery in 2021, and then it will peter out slowly in 2022. So the local markets will continue to rely to a large extent on fiscal policy as well in the course of this year. And these are the figures to watch. I don't think there is a major. I think the good news is I don't think there's a major risk on the horizon for this recovery for the GCC countries, right? The way things are going right now, there's a significant, it can only improve. There's been a significant hit in the past year. I think in this year, most of the GCC countries are actually on a strong vaccination drive, which is a very positive development. They have also the oil and gas prices are back. So these are going to be two very strong elements that will drive recovery. So I don't see, there's no major risk of of food price or even financial crisis that is being discussed at the moment. Because if the oil price comes back, I think a lot of the liquidity will come back into the economy as well. So I don't see a major risk on the horizon. I think this is the good news for the MENA region. It's and that's why it's a bit of it's less of an up and down, and it's the path will be smoother in many ways, and will go more in a straighter line than in many other regions where there's a lot of risks that are still remaining.
So yeah, we have a few maybe more statements on the previous comment on Africa. The level of COVID spread in Africa is slower than in Europe. In general, there's a very good experience in dealing with Ebola in the past in Africa. So the economic growth in African countries is higher than compared to some European countries. And the demography in Africa is different than in Europe. So that's why these kind of challenges kind of arose.
Absolutely, and this all plays a role, right? This all plays a role. And what I think the other factors that are really important is that most of the African countries are less interconnected globally. So, because this is a global issue, they will be less affected by international flows than some of the emerging markets in Asia, for example, because they are much more export-driven, right? So the more export-driven you are, the more it will affect you. But still, so among the African countries, there's significant difference in, first of all, how dependent they are on tourism, right? So this will drive a lot of there are a number of African countries that are very dependent on tourism and tourism receipts. This is one element. And there are many of those in North Africa. So the MENA region is actually a case in point, but also some countries further down in sub-Saharan Africa as well. And generally, countries will be a lot more affected also. They're very dependent on remittances as well So from people who live abroad, from the communities that live abroad, and remittances will also have a negative impact on the African growth. So it is completely correct to say that in Africa, the impact has been less. The impact actually depends on the country, right? We have actually done a study on this. It's called the COVID Economic Recovery Index. It is a website, and it really looks at how the countries are impacted in Africa and around the world. So the impact depends on the country. It's very different in Africa, depending on the country. The recovery process is going to be potentially much slower because the countries have economies that are much less strong, the institutions are less strong, the financial power is just much less than it is in many of the other countries as well. And the countries do not have the fiscal means, the financial means to be able to support the economy either. So, there is an interplay between those positive factors that were mentioned that I completely agree with, and some of them more negative.
You touched upon a point which I'd like to continue on the discussion, is the tourism. But before that, just I'd encourage our audience to use the Q&A slot, not the chat. The chat has been disabled. So going back, as I mentioned, tourism is something Swati already picked up on from the beginning of the discussion, and the effect of the current economic status on tourism and travel. We're not even talking about leisure, but it's actually just travel now. So please, floor is yours.
Yes, tourism. I mean, you are all involved in one way or another in this industry. And the past year, so this is like, essentially this shows that how bad it was, how bad last year was really. Minus 75% in terms of international tourist arrivals globally. It's huge. It's just, the industry obviously has been very significantly affected. And the effect was across the board. So, there are some differences. Asia and the Pacific, minus 84. In Asia, it was a bit stronger than it was in the Americas. But frankly, the differences are quite small in their overall comparison. So it has been wiped out. The industry has been basically wiped out over the past year quite significantly around the world in all of the countries. And let's take a look at the next slide, because it's also interesting to see from which countries the outbound tourism. So this is the inbound. And this is the international travel expenditure. This is the demand for outbound travel. So it's the other side, right? So when you look at the outbound travel, actually, the picture is somewhat different. You see, inbound travel in Asia was very bad, but outbound travel, China, which is a significant, huge market for outbound travel, it's a source of many, many tourists and much travel. It was the lowest drop, minus 53%. And the highest drop was around North America. So Americans travel significantly less abroad than Chinese who stopped traveling, right? And then Europe is somewhere in between, depending on which country we're talking about. But it's interesting to see that actually the Chinese are still traveling significantly more, that the effect on Chinese travel was much slower than the effect on the American and the North American travel. And let's move fairly quickly to the next one as well. What does it mean for the future? And this is essentially the big question that we're all wondering about. And there's of course no answer. It's a bit of a crystal ball type of issue, right? I think many studies have been done, many surveys have been run as well, and a lot of social media analysis is being done and using many different methods. When can we expect a rebound in the international tourism in your country? So this data is based on a panel of tourism experts, which is done by UNWTO, which is the UN organization responsible for tourism. And essentially, it is quite sobering. So most of the experts, they think it's going to be or half of the experts think it's going to be in 2022, and half of the experts think it's going to be in 2020 and 2021. 2021 Q3 is going to be a significant, that's what many people expected. And Q4, some of them still remain hopeful for Q4, but then the safer, there's a significant range of expectations here. I think this is what I'm trying to say. And half of the experts, they believe that it's only going to be in 2022. Of course, when you look at surveys, you always have to think about who is responding to the survey and what is this all about, right? So there's a lot of biases. When we respond to a survey, there's a lot of biases that we have, which are our internal assumptions about the future. And those will influence also those respondents. And we will take a look at the Middle East region as well, where this is a little bit clearer. So let's move to the next slide as well. So this is what is going to happen in the Middle East. So really interesting. Why? Because you see that in the Middle East, actually, most of the rebound is expected to 2022 and zero to 2021. I think this reflects to some extent also the economic situation, right? So when you think about, and probably to a large extent, reflects the situation in the North African countries as well that are very dependent on tourism, and less in the Gulf region, where the rebound can be much faster because of the vaccination progress. This is a survey that was done in January 2021, so it's not very old, but given the current circumstances, things are moving very quickly. But you see that half of the people expect for 2022, and then it declines. So when it will return to pre-pandemic levels, right? Not when it will rebound, but return to pre-pandemic levels. This is an important one. And you see on the left side, the indicator that you see on the left side, this green line, it shows the travel sentiment. So it's an indicator that has been captured through social media conversations. It's UNWTO that's publishing it. You have the website underneath. It's called the Tourism Recovery Tracker. And I think what's really interesting about it is how much it moves up and down. So how much the sentiment and the perceptions are changing from 1 month to the next. So it is this uncertainty again, and this volatility in terms of the perceptions that is really the defining feature of the time, and it's very difficult to predict. What does it mean for players in this sector? Essentially, that you need to be really on your feet all the time, use the tools that are available, track your main markets on a continuous basis, and be able to also market to those key markets, key source destinations, or your source countries, in order to be able to be effective. And the small differences like this will have, so in the strategy, how you approach those markets, are going to make a huge difference on your bottom line. I guess this is the takeaway, because of the volatility and because of how you position yourself. So it is time for resilience and flexibility and being agile on a continuous basis, in order to be able to navigate this significant uncertainty that we're seeing right now. Let's move on to the next slide to take a look. So this is again the global picture, and I think it also goes down to this question: when will it come back to the post-COVID economy globally? And it's very sobering. Why it's very sobering? Because it's not until 2025 that we are expecting this to rebound. These are modeling. This is a modeling done by Statista, which is a private company. I think what this is hiding is, and it's, first of all, one thing is it's extremely difficult to model this right now. Extremely difficult to model because modeling is always based on the past and on structural, all those structures that we know from the past, the behaviors, the logistics connections, the infrastructures. A lot of this has shifted during the pandemic, and we don't know yet what's going to remain in place and what will change, right? Which of the new behaviors are going to change for good? We know that people did less city trips, they went more to remote areas, they traveled more domestically and closer to home during the pandemic if they traveled. This is something that has been observed in Europe for sure. So we don't know how this behavior will change durably, right? And it's very difficult to shed light on this, and it's very difficult to reflect this in the modeling. So this can go much significantly faster or also significantly slower. But this is, in a way, I wanted to show this to you because it's a baseline that we're talking about in terms of travel and tourism projections.
Yeah, exactly, Margareta. This was my question to you, and I was wondering when you were presenting that, given the travel restrictions that we are in and with uncertainty, and then also we're talking about the tourism getting rebound, what kind of tourist behavior will be impacted? In terms of their choice of destination and even the type of tourism that they will perform. So what do you think it's going to be? Of course, I've heard that, it has impacted the choice of, the destination. It's no more leisure tourism for them anymore. It's mostly to meet their near and dear ones if they're outside their country borders. So what more are you looking forward to in terms of their choice of destination? This is post-COVID situation when we'll reach the pre-pandemic era, kind of, will match up to the pre-pandemic era. So will there be an impact on the, their choice of destination, their behavior towards picking up the kind of tourism? So what's your take on that?
Yes, there's definitely going to be. So there are many factors that play into this. One of them, the behavioral factors are important. One of the interplays in tourism right now that we have seen in Europe, and also in the US, there's a surging demand for secondary residences, which is a form of tourism as well. But it will probably go at the, given that people have limited funds and limited income and limited time, it'll probably go at the expense of more international tourism. So domestic tourism and regional tourism will rebound much faster than the international tourism, right? And this is behind also some of the slower rebound of the overall travel and tourism revenue that's going to be bouncing back. So we will have a slower rebound in terms of international travel overall. Intercontinental travel will be more difficult for the time being. Then the travel between, there will be, destinations that are considered safe because of the vaccination campaigns, for example, where the demand will pick up relatively quickly. So then the way destinations market their vaccination efforts and their health and safety efforts is crucially important. But still, the intercontinental travel will not resume until a later stage, right? So that's when we, and that goes across, maybe with the exception of the family travel, as you were talking about. I think this was an important reason. Many people who were traveling in the past year, they were not traveling for leisure. The business travel has dropped as well. Travel to events, sports events, cultural events has also dropped very significantly, but almost to zero as well. But what remained and what people were doing a lot more of is this family travel, right? The family connection travel. This will remain. This was the steady bottom line that has kept the industry going to some extent, and has changed also the routes, the travel routes as well significantly. Leisure travel, local leisure travel, regional leisure travel will rebound relatively quickly. Intercontinental will be slower. There will be a durable shift. That's, for me, the big question mark is how rapidly will city travel rebound, because I think there will be a durable shift in terms of whether people want to travel to cities and have the same type of travel experience as they did in the past. So that's a big question mark as well. Some of the trends that we are observing now in Europe is that there is a lot of that it continues, and there's a lot of arbitration actually as well between the destinations. So the moment one destination opens, it is very quickly in demand because it's safer, right? So right now, what's one of the experiences that why the pandemic is still continuing and we're facing a third wave in the Nordic countries, so Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Switzerland also as well, but to a certain extent, but those three big markets. In Western Europe, so Spain and Portugal, Spain in particular, it's slower. So there's a lot of arbitrage right now between the destinations. This will probably continue for quite a while. It will be very much driven by safety requirements. But what is very difficult to say right now is which of the new behaviors will stick. My personal take is that people will come back actually to travel much faster than we think. There's a lot of parallels also with the world of the future of work, right? The way we work has changed significantly. And the moment companies started opening up offices again, people were flocking back to the office and to city centers again. So I think there's a lot of parallels here that can be drawn, and it will rebound. My personal take is it will rebound much faster than we think.
That's very good news, actually. So we are so curious to know what your further presentation is.
Yes, so maybe this is just one. This is just one, and this is not about tourism. Sorry, it's a wrong caption. But travel, the sports industry. By when will the sports industry recover? Which is a specific question. This is from PwC analysis. They have a survey as well, so there's also survey data. So also here you see 2022 is the year that that experts are expecting the industry to be back, and this is we're talking about, you know, including physical sports events. So 22, and it will start coming back in 2021 with a major rebound in 2022, and then this recovery will continue. So there will be, you know, a major rebound in next year, and then it will continue growing over the of the coming years. Let's move to the next one as well. And this is really, you know, interesting to see because it gives you a regional picture as well. So this is the market growth outlook for sports, right? How will markets grow past 3 to 5 years in comparison to next 3 to 5 years? And you see that actually the good news here is in the Middle East, it's the only region where it's growing, where it's expected to grow. And this includes, you know, all types of consumption of sports events. So it is the only region where it's expected to grow. There's a number of regions where we expect a significant fall in terms of the market growth when it comes through to the sports market. And this is also from the PwC Sports Survey. I'll stop here. I think this is my last slide, and we can move on to, we can, you know, have more questions, more discussion. Happy to engage.
Thank you, Margareta. Actually, yes, we do have a few more questions which lined up, especially on this last few slides about the COVID effect on sports. Of course, the main question is, will the vaccination rollout be a bit accelerated, considering that Qatar is hosting the World Cup event end of next year? And would that help nations who are a bit struggling in getting the vaccine to roll that a bit faster for them as fans coming over to watch the games?
Yes, I think so. The vaccination rollout is currently being accelerated actually quite significantly. And there are new vaccines also coming to, and I mean, the good news about the vaccination is that as we develop new vaccines, those are much easier to administer, and from a logistical perspective, much easier to transport, right? And this is going to significantly accelerate also the vaccine rollout in developing countries, and notably in African countries as well. So I think what we need to, there are a number of factors that could speed up the vaccine campaigns. And even, you know, the data that I've shown before about vaccination in 2023 in large parts of Africa, you have to keep in mind that in Africa, probably when you look at the different income strata, right, the people that you want to attract will go to a sports event in Qatar. They will be probably the ones that are more the urban populations. Those are likely to be vaccinated much sooner. As somebody has mentioned, the rollout has started in Africa as well, but those are the urban populations that will be vaccinated much sooner. So it's probably, when it comes to traveling to event, the picture, and when you think about who you want to reach within each of the countries, the picture looks better than for the economy as a whole and for the population as a whole, because the strata of the population you want to reach, especially in developing countries, they are more the populations that will be vaccinated faster. In many other countries, you know, in the large countries, the vaccination rollout is going to can speed up as well. India has been making great efforts, for example. While China has its own vaccine, it's also going relatively rapidly. So in many of those countries, because of the rural-urban differences, it will take time to really vaccinate a significant portion of the population. But the people you will be attracting to sports events, they are probably going to be among the ones that are going to be vaccinated at first. So there will be significant differences between who will be vaccinated at which point in time. You will have the urban centers will probably have a critical mass relatively quickly, whereas the rural areas will take more time.